Hey everybody, it's Nick. Welcome back. We had a great session this week. Super excited to tell you about it. A lot of shenanigans, a lot of fun stuff, and as you can tell from the title, some pretty funny stuff as well. So we're going to jump right into it here. When last we left our heroes, they had finally made their way to the colony of New Andras to get some information on the region and the area. However, lo and behold, vampires and zombies had taken over the colony, and so they quickly decided to advance in a different direction, which is a very smart move, go them. And in the process, however, their captain had been lost, and so they elected a new captain, a PC named Clement, played by my friend Jordan, and they set off under Jordan's command to the nearby large island of Vorshin to see if it would make a good colony, which is sort of their mission here. So it was a great plan overall. So the party makes their way towards Vorshin, and we sort of start the session off with them sailing there, and then they weigh anchor just off of the shore of Vorshin, and it's nightfall, so they're going to wait for the morning to go ashore and see what they can see. And one of the players, the crow's nest guy, says, "Hey, can I see anything in the water?" Just making sure it's safe. And so I had him roll a perception check, and I didn't really plan on there being anything here, but he asked the question, and I figured no is a boring answer, so I gave him an answer. And I told him that in the water there were a bunch of bioluminescent figures. He saw little glowing stars reflecting the stars above, and he would know, he's an experienced sailor, he would know those are jellyfish, and sometimes they're bioluminescent. It's just a neat, cute little scene, I thought. Not a big deal. However, the players, after explaining to the greenhorns what jellyfish were, then came to the realization that maybe they could weaponize these things, attach them to weapons and get extra stinging poison damage and throw them at people, and who has the spell Catapult to launch a bunch of jellyfish. So they spent about 15 or 20 minutes in real life discussing the possibilities, and I finally got to the point where I said, "So, what are you guys doing?" And they dropped a net over the side of the ship and scooped up as many jellyfish as the net could hold, which is not that many jellyfish because the net was meant for fish, not jellyfish. But they grabbed a few, and they had some jellyfish up on deck of the ship, and one of the players, Clement, reaches forward and says, I'm gonna touch a jellyfish. I'm gonna touch it right on the stinger." And I describe as his finger comes in contact with the stinger, and nothing happens. He feels a little bit tingly, but that's about it. And the players had a collective, "Oh, right," moment as they realized that not all things in the world are possibly weaponized, and jellyfish most of the times are actually totally harmless to humans. And they sort of remembered that, and I thought it was going to be a bummer of a scene for them because they were looking forward to doing this cool, interesting thing, and they had a great plan, and I had sort of ruined it. But actually, most of the players said, "Wow, that was super cool." I was greatly surprised because they thought it was neat that the world was just a real place, that it felt like it was normal and things just weren't existing to be weaponized, that they were just doing stuff. It felt like a real place, and I really appreciated that because that's what I'm going for. That's what I want them to think. So I was very excited. So the next morning, the players are planning out what they should do. They see the island of Vorshin in front of them, and it is dominated by a large single mountain surrounded by plains and sort of savanna. And trying to figure out exactly what they should do, one of the players has, through a previous encounter, acquired a sentient ring known as Tobias, who has a lot of information about the region. So it's kind of neat because it's fun to roleplay, and it's a good chance for me to insert some information about the region for the players to learn more things about what's going on. And they ask, "What's the deal with this island? What's going on here? Does anyone live here? What's the deal?" And Tobias, in his slow, sad, Eeyore-esque intonation, gives them a description about the island of Vorshin and says there is a tribe of people who live here that are normally peaceful, but they often get raided by pirates. They seem to worship the mountain itself, which is weird, but whatever. And that's most of what they get out of the ring, and so they decided, okay, let's go ashore and we're going to climb this mountain for the purpose of looking for these people. And some people are more interested in the mountain climbing part, and some people are more interested in the tribe finding part. But that will come to a point later on. Stay tuned. So the players go ashore with about 6 crew members in tow, and this created an interesting problem because technically when they gained control of the ship, they gained control of about 16 NPC sailor crew members. And I have no interest in running all of these NPCs in combat at once. I want the players to feel like the heroes, not generals in an RTS game moving their troops around. So I suspect that is going to be a point I will need to communicate to the players in coming sessions about what the expectations can be for those sailors. They want to follow orders, but they don't want to rush straight into combat just to supplement the party's ranks. And so I solved that this time around by having those NPCs refuse to go into any situations that would necessitate combat, things like spooky, creepy places, which will come up later. So they go ashore with all these NPCs in tow, and 2 of the players are just dead set on climbing the mountain. Just climb the mountain and we'll solve our problems from there. The mountain is the thing, because they know that the mountain is this thing's god. They want to see what's at the top of the mountain. 3 of the other players are interested in finding the tribe and figuring out what are the people who live here and can we make this place a safe colony, which technically is their objective in this whole campaign. So they go ashore, and this is pretty straightforward. They both want the same thing. They want to get up to a medium point on the mountain. One group wants to climb the mountain, one group wants to use the vantage point to spot the tribe. However, these 2 objectives come into conflict when they spot a large series of tracks. It looks like hundreds of feet wide, like dozens and dozens of people had moved a lot of stuff through here, almost like a nomadic tribe was traveling through these grasslands. I described lots of footprints, bare footprints that looked humanoid but not human, and several of the players wanted to go follow these footprints. They wanted to follow and see where the tribe was at. They figured, reasonably so, that this was the nomadic tribe they were looking for, and they wanted to meet them. The other players wanted to climb the mountain for the sake of climbing the mountain. So at this point, I turn to one of the 2 players who wants to just go off by themselves and climb and say, hey, I have no problem with you guys splitting up and separating and tackling different objectives for a time and then meeting back up. That's not a big deal to me. Oftentimes people fear splitting the party, but I want to reassure that these players that it is a totally possible thing and I'm not scared of it. I do let them know that the world is the world. I'm not going to change anything they encounter because there's only 2 of them. It's meant for the whole party to face, and if they don't want to do that, then they can run away. And I thought this might scare the player away because I sort of said, hey, the world is the world and it's not going to adapt itself to better accommodate your decisions. But actually, he thought that was super cool. He said, yeah, awesome. I want to do that. Let's have the 2 of us go off by ourselves. He was a brand new player. He didn't even know that was an option. And so it was kind of interesting. So he got to tackle that. Matt Colville just recently did a video on splitting the party, and it's really good. I'm not going to summarize the whole thing. I'll link it in the description so you can go watch it if somehow you haven't seen it. But basically, I feel the same way. Splitting the party, not a big deal. It's totally possible. Combat, it can get a little bit messy, but still totally possible. It's tough to juggle a little bit, so it's harder for you as a DM, so maybe that's intimidating, but it's not in any way a cardinal sin of D&D to split the party up. It's not that big a deal. So the party splits up with one group following the tracks that will hopefully lead them to the nomadic tribe, and one group climbing up the mountain. And so I follow the action of the trackers for a little bit, and they follow the tracks, and they come up over a rise, and they see before them a tribe of several hundred humanoid individuals that are covered in fur and really large, 7-8 feet tall, some of them. But the scene is odd too because they look very peaceful and they're hanging out and families are all together and there's tents and teepees and campfires. I sort of describe it in a very Native American sense. The players also thought that was super cool and wanted to make their way down with their hands up saying we're not a threat to go and negotiate, interact with this tribe of individuals. And so as we're following the action over here, what I do is I then cut to the party who had been climbing the mountain, and as they're going their way up, they are looking for caves and caverns and trying to see what they can see from this vantage point. And I tell them that they spot the tribe as well. They choose not to pursue that, and they keep going up the mountain. They're specifically looking for caves and caverns, and so I describe, you find a situation here. And what I do is I take the players out of the room physically to another room and say, this is what you see. You see a metal door with 10 tumblers lined up, and all the tumblers have digits on them. And above the tumblers is a thing etched in the door. It's a code, it's a riddle, it's a puzzle. And I then put the puzzle physically in front of the players and leave them in the other room. They are now separated from the original party, and they're working on this puzzle by themselves. So I cut back to the other party in the other room, and they begin their negotiation with this tribe of what I show them a picture of this, and some of the players recognize as bugbears, which normally bugbears incredibly violent and hostile and warlike. These, not at all, super peaceful. And so they begin this negotiation, but it's really tough because the bugbears only speak Goblin, and none of the players do, and so it's sort of a tense game of charades for a little bit until the chieftain comes up and he speaks incredibly broken Common, and he sort of starts to communicate and figure out who these PCs are, what do they want here. Basically, his first question is, are you guys pirates? Are you going to come here and murder us and try to figure out where we are? And they say, nope, we're coming here in peace, and we're trying to find a place for our colony. We want a place to live, and as they describe this, the bugbears, as soon as they realize they're not pirates, start celebrating. They start partying. They're so excited, and the players are a little thrown off by this because that's kind of weird. And so as they are proceeding further with the negotiations, the bugbears reveal that if they're not pirates, then they must be divine champions who are come to free their silenced god. And at this point, the players go, yeah, that's what we are, because they are educated folk.
Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes!
So the bugbears outfit the PCs with some cool magic items and gear and some health potions and say, yeah, go free our trapped, sealed away, silent mountain god. Normally, they explain, what happens is our truth seeker goes up to this chamber, this cavern in the side of the mountain, and speaks and communes with the mountain itself. The mountain speaks back, so all the players have to do is go and open this chamber, which has been sealed by a mystical, magical door that cannot be opened. And so the players need to go open the door, and they will hear from the mountain that the mountain has been freed, and it will thank them, and then they'll go on their way. It's that easy. It's never that easy. So they hike up the mountain, and they're going to the place that was indicated by the bugbears, and lo and behold, when they get there, they find a few familiar figures. And I describe the situation, and then I bring the other party members back in because, lo and behold, this puzzle door and this door sealing off the chamber are one and the same. So the party members join back up, and it wasn't that big a deal. Ta-da, splitting the party, super easy. So the party members come back in and describe, this was the situation, this was the puzzle. They get the process of explaining what the puzzle was and their notes themselves to help the other people figure it out, because the two people who went off on their own, not really puzzle people. And so it was super tough for them, but they bring it back, they share their notes and what their thought process was, and the other players are puzzle people, and so they quickly solve it, and they open the door, and the door sort of, I describe, fizzles away. It doesn't, like, open, it doesn't, like, fall inward, it doesn't do anything, it shimmers and disappears, it's gone. And that was weird to them. And so they walked in, and they see this, like, incense offering room with like altars and candles and, you know, tapestry on the wall and all kinds of, you know, very shriny type situation looking thing. And the players begin exploring the room. There doesn't seem to be any tunnels or passages or caverns, and they listened, and the mountain doesn't say anything, and so they're trying to figure out, what do we do from here, because obviously it's not solved. It wasn't that easy. And so they are exploring the room, and one of the players inspects the tapestry on the other side of the wall. And as he feels it, he notices that there's no stone behind it. And he pulls it back, and he looks, and there is a whole tunnel inside of there. There is a tunnel into the mountain. A secret tunnel into the mountain. A secret tunnel into the mountain.
Yeah, I forget the next couple lines, but then it goes, secret tunnel, secret tunnel, through the mountain. Secret, 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 secret tunnel, yeah!
So, obviously, when there is a creepy secret tunnel inside the mountain, the players are going to want to go up it, and they definitely do. So they start walking into the tunnel and describe that it is like slowly curving up the mountain like a sloping spiral staircase inside the mountain. It's a very wide, gradual curve, and they're climbing up it for half an hour, an hour and a half, and they're noticing all these cracks and fissures in the walls and floor and ceiling, and after about an hour and a half of walking, there's this odd, like, sucking sound that comes from one of the cracks, and they see this individual pop out of it, and they go, that's not good. And this individual obviously attacks because it's a monster, and they do that. And there's a quick little combat. There's like 6 of these things that come out of these cracks and fissures. And the players are super freaked out by this because there's a bunch of them and they're really worried. And I had sort of engineered these guys to be pretty easy. So, I took the stat block for a choker that's in Mordenkainen's, and the only tweak I really made is that I made them have 1 HP. So I basically used minions from 4th edition. And it was really neat, really effective. The players never caught on to that. They just thought these guys had really low hit points, no big deal. And they thought it was really cool because they got to sweep through all these enemies and carve them up. And I wanted to do this on purpose because for a long time they've been beaten up and haggard and beaten within an inch of their lives. And that's sort of the first tier of 5th edition. It's really tough. It's really hard. But now they're 5th level and they're into the 2nd tier of D&D 5e. And I wanted them to feel like, hey, we're cool. We're awesome. We have grown in power. I wanted to see that contrast between a bunch of these little things are not a problem anymore. They used to be, but now they're not. And so I feel like I really accomplished that. They got what they wanted. They murdered all these things really easily. It wasn't a hard fight at all. They used a couple spells, not a big deal though, and they healed up and pressed on. And as they made their way finally to the top of this spiral cavern sloping cave tunnel thing, they arrive at a door, and I describe this as a similar metal door to the one they had encountered before. And I begin to describe a riddle etched on the door, and one of the players who had been locked in the other room with the puzzle before, who was not at all interested in puzzles, said, I cast Dispel Magic at 3rd level. And he rolls really well, and I hadn't really planned on what this spell would be to create this puzzle door, but I don't know, I sort of improvised it. And he cast a 3rd level spell that said magic go away, and obviously this door is magical, and he rolled like a 19 on the die roll for dispelling a higher level spell. And so I said, yeah, okay, cool, the door just dissolves. And I figured, the trade-off was spend some time doing a relatively easy riddle, I thought. You can see what it is in the description below. And a relatively easy riddle, or cast one of his 3rd level spells, which are his highest level spell slots. And I said, yeah, that's a worthwhile trade. I'm fine with that. So inside this room they now see, the door has dissolved the same way it normally does, and there's a large cavern with a high ceiling. It's a single final room, and they spot on the far side of the room is a semi-dome of crackling purple energy, and inside that dome is a single childlike individual who is clothed in like a white smock or something along those lines, and this child is sitting with their head downcast and cross-legged on the floor, just sitting there. And between the players and this dome is a single figure with sort of a high collar and long black robes. And I describe as the players enter the room, they hear, not out loud, but in their minds, "Ah, I see you have bypassed my challenges. You are indeed creatures of intelligence. What do you want with the Oracle?" And the creature turns around to reveal themselves to be a mind flayer, an illithid. Now, the players are reeling. This is a lot of information they have taken in just a few seconds. This thing that they've been going to try to save is not a deity, but an oracle in D&D, which I don't know what that means to them, but that's cool and interesting and weird. And also a mind flayer, which some of the players recognize, and all the players know is bad news. So, before you get at me about how telepathy works and mind flayers only speak abyssal and undercommon or whatever, know that I don't care, because this was a super interesting, really cool scene where they got to roleplay out a discussion, and it was only made possible because they spoke common and the mind flayer could speak common into their minds, and it was really neat. So I'm giving permission to other DMs to do the same thing. You can know the rules and decide that they don't matter in this situation, because the whole point of the game is fun and drama and excitement, and this scene was all of those things. Very true. Just like the vampires from last session, maybe? Yeah, last session. Anyways, the players are sort of have their heads collectively spinning from all this information, and they're not quite sure how to proceed because they really want to save this oracle, but they know mind flayers are bad news. They also start to realize, hey, this isn't our fight. This isn't our problem. Why are we here again? At one point in the negotiation, the mind flayer begins to lay out the player's options, and he says, hey, you can stay here and become thrall and servants of the illithid, the elder brain, and do our bidding, which the players are not super keen on, and the other options are to leave or die in combat with me. And so the players sort of are trying to hedge their way around these options and try to figure out, well, maybe let's ask the question of the oracle first. Let's see if we can talk to the oracle about something before we join one way or leave. Or the Mind Flayer says, no. The only way you talk to the oracle is if you are my servant. And the players are not totally wild about that option. So they begin to talk about, wait, yeah, this isn't our fight. This isn't our mission. We could just leave. We don't have to be here. We don't want to fight a Mind Flayer. That's crazy. And I was totally okay with this option. But I obviously wanted them to fight the Mind Flayer and get to talk to an oracle because that's super cool. But if the players aren't into it, they have another idea, that's fine with me too. If the players had joined the Mind Flayer, that's fine with me too. That would have thrown things for a loop, I think. They did not do that, however. Because what I had them do, as they were sort of the general consensus of the party was shifting to, let's just leave. This is not our circus, not our monkeys, not our problem. Let's just go. And I sort of had the oracle, who's been sitting on the ground cross-legged, just at this point look up and make eye contact with all of the players individually. And I gave and I described this hurt, pleading, helpless look. And boy, did that work, because one of the players is a really soft spot for the younger sister types. And he looked at me and was like, "Ah, man, Nick, why'd you do that?" All right, well, I cast Dissonant Whispers on the Mind Flayer. Now, obviously, that was the reaction I was going for, because that started combat, and I didn't want to force them into that, but I did want to play on their heartstrings a little bit to see just how committed to your characters and their motivations are you. Let's see what you're going to do here when this helpless, childlike individual, who they found out later is like 1,000 years old, so it's not a kid, but they found this childlike individual who basically says, "Help me," with their eyes, and man, that worked. It was super effective. So combat begins, really, really cool. The Mind Flayer pretty much instantly saves from Dissonant Whispers because he has a crazy high wisdom saving throw. And then he returns with a Mind Blast of his own. And that was super rough because none of the party is very smart. They've got, I think the highest is like a +1 in intelligence, and none of them have proficiency. A lot of them have 0 or -1, and so the Mind Flayer's Mind Blast was a big deal, and only one of the players saved from it, which was really rough, and that sort of set things off on the players had a back foot situation from the get-go there. The Mind Flayer then released his pet Intellect Devourer, who spent the whole fights trying and failing to banana one of the players and drain their intelligence and stun them and all kinds of fun stuff, and that didn't happen, which I guess is kind of good because at this point in the game I have no idea how the players would fix 0 intelligence if that were to come up. No idea how they would restore that, and so I guess it was a good thing that they didn't do that. But the fight proceeded, and it was pretty great. It was really hard running the Mind Flayer as just one character versus 5 players, but because it was so challenging, it made it a decent fight, actually. And the Mind Flayer got to do a bunch of cool things. He at one point cast Dominate Monster, which I described as an 8th level spell, because it is, to the players. And it didn't end up doing anything because Travis made his saving throw, but all of the players were super freaked out by the fact that the Mind Flayer could even talk about, let alone cast, 8th level spells. So that freaked him out a little bit, and they proceeded to fight. The other major thing was that Tico got super stunned, and the Mind Flayer got to wrap his tentacle things around his brain and dig into his skull with the beak, and it was rough. It was awful. However, Tico is the only melee character, and he had described previously that he felt like he wanted to be a little tankier just to be able to sort of endure that frontline stuff, and I said, yeah, I can make that happen. And so one of the items that the Bugbears gave them was a necklace that had 5 charges on it, and whenever you hit 0 hit points, one of the charges is expended, and you automatically gain 5 times your level in hit points back. And so, obviously this is a super powerful item, but I'm fine giving players items like that if they have limited uses, and this does. It only has 5 uses, and so if he doesn't want it to get used up, he should take it off. However, in this case, it was super useful because the Mind Flayer dug into his scalp, cracked his scalp open, was about to eat his brains when Instantly, Tico regains 5 times his hit points and breaks free from the stun and turns around, does a stunning strike of his own against the Mind Flayer, which turned the fight around in a huge way. 10d10 damage was a big deal, but Tico was able to get out of that situation and turn it around, and it actually worked out pretty well for the heroes, so good job, you guys. But that stunning strike was the turning point in the battle, for sure. The Mind Flayer got a bunch of attacks against him, all at advantage. He took a ton of damage, and the very next round he went down. He never got to plane shift away, which I thought would be neat, but also in the moment I sort of realized, man, it would be a bummer if you don't get to kill this thing. I know it's not their villain, and it could get away no problem, but I also wanted them to get to kill a Mind Flayer, because how often do you get to kill a Mind Flayer? So they got to do that, they killed the Mind Flayer, and then as soon as they did that, the purple dome of energy over the Oracle vanishes and is gone. So obviously it was magic put on by the Mind Flayer. And now they get to free and talk to an Oracle, which is super neat. So the Oracle is profusely gracious to the players and says thank you so much, and offers them a chance to earn a bit of a reward tied to fortune and luck. And so I'm very much playing off of this luck and the fates kind of style of Oracle. Not exactly a pure prophetic future-telling Oracle so much as perfect present knowledge. And so we'll talk more about how the Oracle is going to work in a little bit. But this card game was really, really interesting. I'll describe all the details of it below. I'll write it up on the home brewery and link it to you guys so you can see what it is. But I stole it and modified it from somewhere else and found all the rewards. But basically what happened is, as a result, some players got some cool rewards, 2 of whom got strongholds somewhere else that they are rightfully owners of, but there may be other occupants in them presently. Now, I'm a backer of Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers, and super cool, really looking forward to those rules coming out in a few weeks. And the players are, at the end of this session, which we'll get to, are going off towards their Strongholds, which is going to take a couple of weeks because those rules need to come out, because I don't have rules for Strongholds just yet. So we'll figure out what happens with them in a couple of weeks, but stay tuned for all that. But basically the caveat with the Oracle is that they can answer questions about the here and the now and make guesses at the future, because they do have perfect knowledge of the present, but they can't just go around predicting the future all the time. Also, the Oracle has to stay in the mountain. The mountain is what gives the Oracle their power. So the players can come back here if they have specific questions for the Oracle, and I imagine that might happen in the future, all depending on what happens. But they also can't just carry around an encyclopedia of all knowledge at all times to carry around in their back pocket. So I thought it was a nice trade-off, a really good solution for that situation, because Oracles can be kind of messy in D&D. So this is my workaround. Have you guys ever done anything with Oracles? If you have, let me know in the comments. I'm looking for ideas. So the rest of the session unfolded pretty normally, actually. They leave the Oracle after asking a few questions and talking to it for a bit, and then they go back to the Bugbears and say, hey, we freed your god, now everything's fine. And the Bugbears celebrated, and the players recruited a few Bugbear sailors to replace some that had previously been lost in battle. And then the players set sail, and like I said, they're going for the island where they know that those strongholds are, and they're going to go check them out. But I think it'll take a couple sessions. We'll see what happens in the meantime. Maybe some ocean adventures or something like that will happen next week. However, this coming weekend, we are not playing D&D, so tomorrow and Sunday. We're not going to be playing D&D because of scheduling and things can't happen. So if you guys have a video that you think would be interesting, something you want to hear from me about, leave it in the comments. I'm looking for ideas. I don't want to skip next week, but if I don't have anything in terms of an idea, then I don't want to just force it. So it's up to you guys. What do you want to hear about from me? Do you want to hear something about my setting or my thoughts on a specific issue of 5e or D&D in general or anything like that? I'm willing to answer questions and follow up some other things with videos. No big deal. So let me know what you want to hear about for future videos and leave those in the comments, and we'll get straight down to planning what's going to happen in a couple of weeks. I think it's going to be pretty cool. But until next time, I'll see you later, friends.